everybody, welcome back. Sorry my videos have been coming out so sporadically. I've been working on figuring out a way to release them more regularly, but in the meantime, today we're continuing our Legend of Zelda Retrospective review, with the third installment, Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. Released in Japan in 1991, it saw its American release in 1992. It was the only title released on the Super Nintendo, and it would be the last major 2D console release. Forgoing Zelda 2's side-scrolling elements, Link to the Past made a full return to the top-down action-adventure style used in the first game. It also introduced the idea of parallel worlds, which is a theme that appears in many of the games in the franchise, as well as introducing iconic items like the Master Sword. This game was incredibly well received, selling 4.6 million copies worldwide and receiving a lot of critical acclaim. It's had several ports, including one to the Switch, and while there would be no other 2D console releases, Link to the Past certainly paved the way for the 2D titles that released for the Game Boy systems. This game was also the first to go all in with its cartoony style, and it's where we finally start to see the fun and wacky NPCs the series is so well known for. It's almost impossible to ask people about their favorite Zelda games without this game at least being mentioned. But what do I think about it? Well, let's get into it and find out. The game starts with an opening cinematic, already setting itself apart from its predecessors. We learn that an evil wizard named Aghanim has murdered the king, usurped the throne of Hyrule, and locked Princess Zelda in the castle dungeons. While this game is bright and colorful and has a cartoony art style, it doesn't shy away from darker subjects. We get to see the king's body. I like how it's just a bleach-white skeleton propped up in the throne. How, though? And why? I would figure any spell that debones a king would cause damage to the surroundings. That outfit would not be that pristine, unless Aghanim stuffed the skeleton into the robes and set him up on the chair after the fact just to fuck with people. And somehow the castle guards are totally okay with this turn of events. I guess Hylian succession law is weird. Oh, I see you've reduced our monarch to soup stock. By the law of our people, that makes you the new king! Our hero Link, or as I like to call him, Lunk, is woken up by a telepathic message from our titular princess. We see our uncle is getting ready to head out to the castle, and he warns us to stay in bed. But fuck that! He's not our real dad! We make our way to the castle and sneak in via the sewer, where we find our uncle mortally wounded. He gives us his sword and shield, tasking us with the princess's rescue, then succumbs to his injuries. I'll never forget all the fond moments we shared. Stay in bed, Lunk! You're not my real dad! Christ on a bike, this is dark. Now I've got to go on this whole adventure with this hanging over my head. Yeah! Adventure!
Your uncle is dead.
Yeah! So much fun!
Everyone you love dies.
Gotta save the world!
It's all your fault.
Anyway, we save the princess, leaving a cubic fuckton of dead palace guards in our wake, and escape the castle through a secret tunnel in the throne room. Nice to see they've at least cleaned up the king's rotting corpse. We make our way through the sewers and into some kind of storeroom with 2 levers and a locked door.
Pull the lever, Crunk.
Seriously, why do we even have that lever? This doesn't look like part of the dungeon, it looks like a storeroom. Why is there a snake lever? Who built this? How long have those snakes been in there? Why is there a snake lever? We drop Zelda off at the sanctuary, where the priest tells us that Aghanim plans on releasing an ancient seal that imprisons everyone's favorite evil pig wizard Ganon by capturing the descendants of 7 sages that sealed him away in the first place, sending them to the Dark World, an alternate dimension that serves as Ganon's prison. He murdered the king and mind-controlled all the guards in order to... Wait a minute. They were mind-controlled? Well, that's not good. I've killed a lot of those guys! Well, that settles it. No more killing guards. I'm turning over a new leaf. Yeah, got the pacifist ending. Screw it, back to murder. I'll just have to deal with the crippling guilt. This guy was only 2 days from retirement. Anyway, we head off to Kakariko Village to speak with the elders Saharala, Shalahamba, Saskama, Steve. Elder Steve. He tells us the only way to defeat Aghanim is with the Master Sword, so we set about collecting pendants to prove ourselves worthy. Yeah, I know my dead uncle gave me a sword and all, and here I am replacing it, but... in my defense, Uncle's sword can't fire the sword laser! Pew pew! Unfortunately, while we're out collecting magic necklaces, Aghanim finds Zelda and recaptures her, killing the old priest. After facing off against Aghanim in the world's most high-stakes game of ping-pong, he magics us away to the Dark World, and here the adventure begins in earnest. We have to delve into dungeons controlled by Ganon's minions in order to rescue the Sage's descendants, then take on Ganon, defeating him once and for all. Gotta say, I really enjoy the more in-depth storytelling they introduced in this game. We've come a long way from triangle good, pig bad. Though now I think about it, that's basically the plot of this game too, just with extra steps. I also like the little fake-out. Here's a new villain, an evil wizard who commits regicide and kidnaps princesses. Psych! Totally Ganon again. Gameplay is simple enough, it's basically a full return to the controls of the original. The Super Nintendo controller has a few more buttons, but we're still mostly concerned with sword and use item. The switching between the Dark World and Hyrule was a cool mechanic, since they were mirrors of each other with slight differences, and several puzzles in the game require you to jump back and forth and exploit those differences. This game saw a return of a lot of items from the first game, like heart containers, potions, and bombs, but we also got some brand new items that would go on to become series staples, like the hook shot, bottles, and arrows as a separate collectible item. That's right, we no longer have to pay money to fire our bow. Legend of Zelda Archery is no longer brought to us by EA. Speaking of money, we also see the return of good old-fashioned Hylian capitalism. Everything costs a whole heap of rupees, but fortunately it's not that hard to gather together a ton of money. Our inventory is rounded out by a number of other interesting items. We get a lantern that takes over for the candle in the original. We get a number of magic wands with various effects like shooting fire and ice. Or platforms? A net that we can use to catch fairies and put them in bottles, the fairies that automatically resurrect Link when he dies, and we also get magic, though unlike in Zelda 2, where we had the spell list, we now have spell medallions, and we only get 3. Unfortunately, also unlike in Zelda 2, I didn't really have much use for the magic outside of moments where the spells were required. Like in the second game, we can get a pair of boots, but instead of letting us walk on water, it lets us dash. Also, like the first two, the game has a flute. But instead of revealing a dungeon or putting a monster to sleep, it lets us summon a duck that serves as this game's fast travel mechanic. Link to the Past is where the Zelda franchise really started to develop its identity as a fun, quirky adventure game with dark undertones. This is where we really start to see distinct, wacky, and fun NPCs, like the Fortune Teller, or the Thief in the Forest, or the Dwarven Swordsmiths, and then there's the old hag that gives us magic dust in exchange for a mushroom. The magic dust lets us meet another fun NPC, a bat demon thing that claims he's cursing us, while being entirely too polite about it, mind you, when he's actually making all our magic stuff cost half MP. So, with so many unique characters walking around, the world really feels fleshed out. Bosses were also great in this game. The designs are some of my favorites in the series. Each one is fun and unique, requiring different solutions, though in this game they tend to be a bit more gimmicky in places. Like Mothula, my least favorite boss. You have to fight it on a moving floor surrounded by spikes that can also move. There's just too damn much to focus on in this fight. The game also really ramped up the scale of bosses. In the first two games, yeah, they were bigger than Link, sure. But in this game, they're enormous. They're bigger than the houses in Hyrule. So, this game has problems. Every game does, but I can't really think of anything major. Mostly just minor nitpicks. Nothing really stands out to me as being particularly bullshit. I mean, I guess as someone who enjoyed the free-roaming exploration aspects of the first game, having to follow a set path and do things in the proper order was kind of a letdown. But not enough to really trouble me. I guess I don't really so much care for the magic either. The medallions were a cool idea, and I like that they gave me some spells to play around with, but I only used each medallion a grand total of maybe once. This is especially disappointing coming off of my review of Legend of Zelda 2, where you get a spell list and every spell is useful. But before playing Zelda 2, I didn't really notice this as a problem all that much. And without taking other games into account, the spells in Link to the Past aren't bad, they're just forgettable. I guess long story short, I love this game. It's got pleasing visuals, memorable characters, an engaging story. Miyamoto and Tezuka really took what they learned from making the first two games and refined it, building upon the groundwork they had laid. In my opinion, Link to the Past perfected 2D Zelda, even though it would be the last major 2D console release in the series. It's certainly one of my favorites, and so far, I think it's the only game I've ever reviewed where I had a really hard time thinking of any complaints. If you've never played it, I highly recommend doing so. If you have played it already, do it again. And if you're feeling extra froggy, you can find the randomizer hack where all the item locations have been switched up. It adds a lot of replayability, though it can also make the game unplayable. It's down to luck of the draw, really. Anyway, I've been Tom. Thanks for watching.
Link, here come to town.